My name is Monique Carter. I am 50 years old, a widow for the last 10, and the mother of one boy who has become my reason for rising each morning. I have lived most of my life in Atlanta, though the city hasn't always been kind to me. I work nights as a nurse, patching up strangers while patching together my own bills. People say nurses are angels, but the truth is we are simply women and men who keep going when we are too tired to stop. I never thought my life would be extraordinary. I expected to live quietly, raise my son, and carry the weight of memory. The memory of my husband, taken from us by a sudden stroke, and the years of survival that followed. But sometimes life interrupts itself. Sometimes an ordinary evening in a grocery store becomes the dividing line between everything that was and everything that will be. That night, I stood in front of the dairy case, whispering my grocery list like a prayer: milk, bread, eggs, insulin for Jayden. I clutched the cheapest gallon of milk, already calculating the bills waiting at home. My feet ached from 12 hours on the hospital floor, my shoulders heavy with fatigue. At the self-checkout, the screen blinked $42.17. I held my breath until the card approved. The receipt curled into my palm like a white flag, fragile and final. And then I heard it, a thud. A man collapsed near the registers. His body hit the tile with a sound that seemed to drain the air from the store. Shoppers froze. A clerk clutched her phone but didn't move. I moved. "I'm a nurse," I shouted, dropping my bag. My shoes splashed in spilled milk as I knelt by him. His skin was pale, his chest stuttering. I pressed 2 fingers to his neck. His pulse was fading. Training took over. I began compressions, counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, my hands pushed down, steady, demanding life. Around me the world held its breath, but I kept pressing. "Stay with me," I whispered. After long, endless seconds, he coughed, a wet, ragged gasp. His eyes flickered open, gray, stormy, reaching. He gripped my hand, and for a moment I felt the old ache of holding my husband's hand in a hospital bed, begging him to stay. "You're all right," I told the stranger, though my voice cracked with memory. "You're going to be all right." Paramedics rushed in, and I gave them the details: time, response, vitals. They nodded, recognizing another professional. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, he tugged my sleeve. "Phone, may I?" He rasped. I handed him mine. He dialed quickly, murmured words I couldn't catch, then returned it. His lips curved into a faint smile. "I owe you a life," he said. I smiled back, weary but firm. "Then you can start with new shoes." I glanced at my sneakers, soaked in milk. People chuckled nervously, and the store exhaled. He was wheeled away. I picked up my groceries, drove home to a silent apartment, and answered a text from Jayden: "Don't wait up. Love you." At the kitchen table, I spread the bills like a map of my life. Electricity, medical debt from my husband's stroke, the notes that never seemed to shrink. I did the math twice, 3 times, and still came up short. I laid my head beside them and let the darkness swallow me. The knock came just after sunrise. At the door stood a young woman in a navy suit, badge shining, Whitaker Foundation. "Mrs. Carter?" she asked. "Yes. My name is Lena. I work for Mr. Whitaker. Last night you saved his life." "Mr. Whitaker?" I repeated, trying to place the name. "Evan Whitaker," she said softly. "He asked me to give you this." She handed me a thick envelope. Inside was an invitation to visit the Whitaker Foundation headquarters. Beneath it, a smaller envelope. I opened it and out slid my grocery receipt from the night before, folded neatly, with handwriting scrawled across the back. "I owe you a gallon of milk, and so much more. E.W." Behind it was a gift card for $500 to the same store. I stared at it, my hand trembling. For years I had scraped by, each dollar bent until it nearly broke. And now, out of nowhere, this. "You don't have to accept anything," Lena said. "You may refuse, but he would be grateful if you'd meet him. When you're ready." I thought of Jayden's textbook stacked high, his dreams too big for our little apartment. I thought of the man's gray eyes on the grocery floor, whispering, "I owe you a life." "Tell him I'll come," I said slowly, "but only on my own terms." Lena smiled, as if she'd been waiting for that answer. "That's exactly what he hoped you'd say." After she left, I pressed the receipt flat on the table. The ink was smudged, the paper bent, but it carried more than the cost of groceries. It carried the weight of survival and the hint of something new. My name is Monique Carter. I am 50 years old, a widow, a mother, a nurse, and maybe, just maybe, the rest of my story is only beginning. The envelope sat on my kitchen table all night, as though it carried more weight than paper ever should. I didn't open it again, I didn't need to. The words were burned into me. "I owe you a gallon of milk," and so much more. It had been years since anyone owed me anything besides an overdue payment or a promise never kept. By morning, Jayden noticed it. He came into the kitchen, hair wild from sleep, backpack already slung on his shoulder. "What's that, Mom?" "Nothing," I said too quickly. He raised an eyebrow the way only teenagers can, half suspicion, half amusement. "That's a thick envelope for nothing." I sighed. "It's from the man at the store, the one who collapsed. The guy you saved, he tracked you down. Apparently he's someone." I hesitated. "His name is Evan Whittaker." Jayden froze with his toast halfway to his mouth. "The Whittaker, as in Whittaker Foundation, coding scholarships, the science fair sponsor." I nodded slowly. His eyes widened in a way that reminded me of when he was little, the first time he saw snow. "Mom, that's huge. He's like a billionaire. He could." Jayden stopped himself, but I knew where his mind went: tuition, MIT, the kind of future that had always felt just out of reach. I placed my hand over his. "We don't take handouts." "I know," he said softly, "but maybe this isn't that." By 10 o'clock, Lena, the young woman from the day before, was back at my door. I wore my best outfit, which wasn't much. A pressed blouse that had belonged to my sister and slacks I'd bought for church. My shoes still smelled faintly of milk, but I scrubbed them until the stains were barely noticeable. The drive downtown felt like crossing into another world. The Whittaker Foundation building rose in glass and steel, sunlight pouring off it like a promise. I couldn't help but think how many nights I'd walked into hospitals with flickering lights and cracked linoleum floors, while here the very walls gleamed. Inside, the lobby stretched upward, banners displaying smiling young scholars, words like opportunity and innovation etched in bold letters. I saw kids with faces like Jayden's, brown, bright-eyed, full of possibility. Lena guided me to the elevator and pressed the button for the top floors. "He asked to see you privately," she said. My hands twisted together in my lap as the elevator hummed upward. My heart beat the way it did before a code blue, when you didn't know what you'd find on the other side of the curtain. When the doors opened, there he was. Evan Whittaker stood by the window, sunlight cutting across his figure. He wasn't dressed like the billionaires I'd seen in magazines, no tailored suit, no shiny cufflinks. Just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, gray slacks, and a face that looked younger when he smiled than when he didn't. "Mrs. Carter," he said, walking forward with his hand outstretched. "Thank you for coming." "Call me Monique," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not showy, his eyes the same storm gray I'd seen as he gasped for air on the grocery store floor. "Monique," he repeated as though he were testing the sound of it. "I wanted to meet the woman who quite literally kept me here." "You don't owe me anything," I said quickly. "That's where you're wrong." He gestured for me to sit. "I owe you honesty and an opportunity if you'll hear me out." I sat, smoothing my blouse across my lap. "I'm listening." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I grew up in foster care, bounced between homes, never quite belonging. If not for a teacher who believed in me, I wouldn't be sitting here. The foundation is my way of repaying that debt. But last night reminded me, Sometimes the people who save us aren't in classrooms or boardrooms. Sometimes they're a tired nurse in a grocery store at the end of her shift. I didn't know what to say. Compliments like that felt too large to fit me. I don't want headlines, he continued. I don't want photo ops. What I want is to offer your son a scholarship. Full tuition, books, everything, and I'd like to repair your home. I heard from Lena that your roof leaks. Heat rushed to my face. Who told you that? He raised his hands. Forgive me. She mentioned it casually, nothing more. I only mean no one should work as hard as you do and still live with broken things. I folded my arms. I've lived with broken things for a long time. We manage. His gaze softened. Managing isn't the same as thriving. For a moment, I wanted to believe him, but a voice in my head, my mother's voice, sharp from years of caution, whispered, "Nothing free comes without a price." "What do you want in return?" I asked. "Nothing," he said simply. "Well," he chuckled, "maybe one thing, tell your son not to give up. Too many bright kids quit before the finish line because no one cleared the path." I searched his face for an angle, but there was only sincerity and a weariness around his eyes that told me he'd fought his own battles. Before I could respond, the door opened. A man in a tailored suit stepped in, holding a folder. His jaw was tight, his smile thinner than paper. "Mr. Whitaker, sorry to interrupt, I just need your signature." Evan introduced him. "Monique, this is Colton Reeves, our chief financial officer." Colton extended his hand but didn't quite meet my eyes. "Mrs. Carter, I've read about your heroic actions." The pause before heroic made it sound like an accusation. "It wasn't heroic," I said. "It was what I'm trained to do." Colton's smile didn't reach his eyes. He placed the folder in front of Evan. "The media team is eager to run with your story. A widow, single mother, saving the city's most prominent philanthropist. It's compelling. They'd like a statement from her." He glanced at me as though I were a line item. Evan's face hardened. I said no media. With respect, Colton pressed, "Donors expect visibility, a story like this." I said no. Evan repeated, sharper this time. Colton's eyes flicked toward me, assessing, before he forced another tight smile. "As you wish." He left the room, closing the door a little too firmly. The silence stretched. "I'm sorry about that," Evan said. "He doesn't always remember why we do this." I shook my head. "I'm used to people wanting to use my story without asking. Poverty makes good theater, doesn't it?" Evan leaned forward. "I promise you, Monique, this isn't theater, it's a chance. You don't have to decide today. Take the papers home. Read them. Burn them if you want. But please don't let suspicion steal from you what you've already earned." I took the folder he offered. It felt heavier than paper should. When I left the building, the sunlight was blinding. I pressed the folder to my chest, feeling the weight of possibility and the shadow of doubt pressing against each other. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure which would win. I carried the folder home as if it were made of glass. That evening, I set it on the kitchen table, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. I made dinner instead. Fried chicken thighs and collard greens, the kind Jayden loved. He walked in late from his shift, smelling of detergent and fryer oil, and saw the folder waiting like a guest at the table. "Did you read it yet?" he asked, his eyes darting toward the foundation's logo on the cover. "Not yet, Mom." His voice was a mixture of pleading and restraint. He wanted to push, but he knew better than to push me too far. "At least look at it." I sighed, wiped my hands on a towel, and sat down. He pulled up a chair beside me. Together we flipped through the pages. Scholarship details, full tuition, living stipend, mentorship program. Then a section about home repair assistance. The foundation would cover the roof, the plumbing, the wiring. Jayden let out a low whistle. "This is everything." I kept my face steady, though my chest ached with the weight of possibility. "It's an offer, not a promise." Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, my heart sank. "Tanya," I said. My late husband's younger sister stood there, wearing too much perfume and the same impatient smirk she'd had since we were in our 20s. She lived only a few blocks away but rarely visited unless she wanted something. "Monique," she said sweetly, though her eyes flicked past me to the table where the folder sat. "I heard the news. You saved some big shot downtown, got yourself in the paper." "It wasn't in the paper," I said flatly. "And who told you?" "Oh, you know how people talk. Word gets around." She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, brushing past me. "Whitaker Foundation, huh? That's no small thing." Jayden stiffened beside me. "Hi, Aunt Tanya." She kissed his cheek, too brightly. "Hi, baby, look at you, taller every time I see you. You're the pride of this family, you know that." He glanced at me uncertain. He had heard those words before, usually followed by some scheme. Tanya sat down at the table, pulled the folder toward her as if it belonged to her. She flipped through the pages, nodding. "Full tuition, living stipend, and repairs to the house. Well, looks like our boy hit the jackpot." "Our boy?" I repeated. She smiled, unbothered. "Don't look at me like that, Monique. You know I've always cared about Jayden. Since my brother passed, I've made it my duty to make sure he gets every opportunity." My chest tightened. "Your duty? Tanya, I've been the one raising him, alone. And I've been watching you struggle," she shot back. "You think I don't see the bills, the way you're running yourself into the ground? Maybe it's time you let someone else make decisions for Jayden's future." I clenched my fists beneath the table. "Excuse me." She leaned forward, her voice syrupy. "I'm saying maybe the foundation should be dealing with me. I can help guide Jayden into the right programs, manage the money, make sure nothing gets wasted." "Manage the money?" My voice rose despite myself. Jayden's eyes darted between us. "Aunt Tanya, I don't need." She cut him off. "Sweetheart, you're 17. You don't know how the world works. But I do. And I know opportunities like this don't come without strings. You need someone who knows how to pull them right." I took the folder from her hands, sliding it back toward me. "Jayden doesn't need a manager. He needs a mother, and he has one." Tanya's smile faltered, replaced by something sharper. "Don't get defensive, Monique. I'm just trying to help. But if you don't let me, others might think you're not fit to handle it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Not fit. The same knife that had been pressed against widows and single mothers for generations. I stood, my voice steady. "Thank you for your concern, but my son's future is not a vote you get to cast. This is my household, my responsibility." She rose too, eyes glinting. "We'll see about that." She kissed Jayden's cheek again, too firmly this time. "Think about what I said, baby. Don't let your mama's pride cost you everything." When she left, the silence felt heavier than the folder between us. Jayden spoke first. "She can't do anything, right? Legally?" I wanted to say no, but the truth was complicated. Tanya still had her brother's last name, and she knew how to stir trouble. She had even once been listed as an emergency contact when Jayden was younger. I forced a smile. "She can't take you away from me." But as I looked down at the folder, I knew Tanya wasn't finished. Family has its own kind of courtroom, and battles there are rarely fought with fairness. That night, long after Jayden fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table again. The folder lay open, its promises glowing under the dim light. I could almost hear Tanya's voice echoing, "Not fit." I pressed my hands flat on the table, steadying myself. I had carried this boy through fever nights, scraped knees, science fairs, and grief storms. No one, not even blood, was going to rewrite that. Still, I knew one thing for certain. Saving a stranger's life in a grocery store had been the easy part. The harder fight was already knocking on my door, wearing my husband's last name. A week after Tanya's visit, I found myself standing on the marble steps of the Whitaker Foundation, clutching Jayden's arm like I used to when he was a toddler. The invitation said it was a celebration of opportunity, a formal event where scholarship candidates would be introduced to the board and donors. I hadn't wanted to go. I told myself I was too busy, too tired, too wary. But Jayden had looked at me with those wide, hopeful eyes, and I couldn't bring myself to steal that from him. He wore the only suit he owned, a hand-me-down from a cousin, altered until it barely recognized itself. I wore a simple navy dress and the pearl earrings my husband had given me the year Jayden was born. The lobby was grander than any church I'd ever stepped into. Chandeliers glowed overhead, and a red carpet rolled across the floor. Men in dark suits and women in bright dresses mingled, wine glasses tilting in their hands. We were handed name tags. Mine said Monique Carter, Guest of Honor. The words felt heavy. A photographer directed us to the steps outside where other families posed. Mothers and sons, fathers and daughters, all of them smiling as though they belonged there. Jayden stood tall beside me, but I could feel the stiffness in his shoulders. The flash went off once, twice, and then came the question. "Mrs. Carter?" A reporter called, pushing through the crowd. "How does it feel to go from a grocery store nurse to saving the city's most famous philanthropist? Quite the Cinderella story, isn't it?" The microphone was thrust toward me. I froze, heat rising to my face. "It wasn't a fairy tale," I said carefully. "It was CPR, a life saved because I was trained, that's all." The reporter smiled, not satisfied. "But surely you must feel chosen, blessed. Some say luck finally found you." I felt Jayden's eyes on me, waiting. I thought of Tanya's smirk, of Colton's thin smile in that office. I straightened my back. "I don't think of it as luck," I said, my voice steadier now. "I think of it as years of hard work for my son, for myself. If anything is blessed, it's the chance to prove we're more than the stories people want to tell about us." There was a murmur in the crowd. The reporter lowered his mic, almost annoyed that I hadn't played along. From the corner of my eye, I saw Evan. He had been standing back, letting the spotlight fall on the students. But now he stepped forward, clapping once. "Well said, Monique." His voice carried across the steps. "The foundation doesn't make heroes, it just recognizes them." The cameras swung toward him, and in that moment I realized he had shifted the spotlight away from me, not stealing it, but shielding me. Still, I felt the weight of eyes on my skin as we moved inside. At the reception hall, Jayden was swept away by other students, talking about robotics projects and coding camps. I stood alone, watching the glitter of chandeliers reflect in my half-empty glass of water. That's when Colton appeared, sliding up beside me with the same polished smile I'd seen before. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice honeyed. "You handled yourself well out there, very dignified." "Thank you," I murmured, though I knew it wasn't meant as praise. He leaned closer. "The thing is, stories sell. Donors don't give money for test scores. They give because their hearts are touched. And what touches hearts more than a widow who saves a billionaire and raises a genius son? It's perfect." I stiffened. "My life isn't for sale." Colton's smile sharpened. "Everything is for sale, Mrs. Carter. You just have to set the price." Before I could respond, Evan appeared again, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "Colton, could you excuse us?" The CFO's jaw twitched. "Of course." He melted back into the crowd, but I could feel his eyes still watching. Evan looked at me, his expression apologetic. "I told you there'd be pressure. I'll do everything I can to shield you from it, but sometimes the machine moves faster than I can stop it." I nodded, though my heart was racing. "I just want my son to be seen for who he is, not for who people want me to be." "And that," Evan said, "is exactly why he deserves every chance we can give him." That night, back home, I scrolled through my phone and saw it, a headline already spreading online. "From widow to hero, the grocery store angel who saved a billionaire." My photo on the steps stared back at me, Jayden at my side, both of us looking out of place in our borrowed clothes. The comments below burned into me. "She hit the jackpot. Gold digger narrative incoming. Where's the GoFundMe link?" I locked the screen, hands shaking. For years I had fought to keep my life private, to guard the little dignity I had. Now it was slipping out of my grasp, one headline at a time. And I knew, deep in my chest, that Tanya would see those headlines too. And she would not waste a moment before twisting them into her own kind of weapon. By the next morning, the article had already spread through every corner of the neighborhood. At the hospital where I worked, nurses teased me gently, holding up their phones with headlines. At church, a deacon pulled me aside to say, "God's lifting you up." Even the cashier at the grocery store asked for details, like saving a billionaire was a recipe I could hand out with the coupons. But at home, when I opened my mailbox, the world felt less like a blessing and more like a trap. Inside was an envelope from the bank. I almost tossed it aside, another statement I already dreaded, but something about the bold red letters on the front stopped me. Notice of overdraft. I frowned. That wasn't possible. I had been careful, almost obsessively so. I opened it at the kitchen table, my hands trembling. The numbers didn't add up. Withdrawals I hadn't made, payments I hadn't authorized. One of them was $1,000 at a car dealership across town. Another, $500 for luxury furnishings. My stomach dropped. I pulled out the shoebox where I kept every receipt, every carbon copy, every scrap of paper I could gather to keep my life from slipping through my fingers. I spread them across the table, lining them up like witnesses in a trial. My handwriting, my dates, my tiny notes in the margins, milk, bread, insulin. None of them matched the withdrawals on the bank statement. The bills began to speak, their neat rows of numbers shouting the same accusation. Someone else had been in my account. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, the one that came after my husband's death when I realized I was alone in the fight. But this was different. This was betrayal with fingerprints. Jayden walked in as I was surrounded by paper. "Mom, what's all this?" "Something's wrong with the bank account." I pushed the statement toward him. "Look at these charges. Do you see them?" He scanned it, his brow furrowing. "You didn't buy a couch. Or a car down payment," I added. He looked up, alarm dawning in his eyes. "Do you think Aunt Tanya?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to believe family had limits. But then I remembered her words at my table. "Maybe it's time you let someone else manage the money." She used to be listed as an emergency contact. I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Back when you were a child, I never thought to change it." Jayden slammed his fist softly against the table. "She's stealing from us." I pressed my palms over the receipts as if I could shield them from her reach. "Not if I can prove it." That afternoon, I went to the bank. The manager, a polite man with tired eyes, explained that an old authorization form from years ago still listed Tanya Brooks as someone who could access certain funds for the benefit of the minor, Monique Carter. "She told us you approved it," he said carefully, sensing the fury rising in me. "I can freeze the account until this is sorted out." "Freeze it," I said. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. When I left the bank, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Carter, I need to talk to you. It's important. Don't tell my mom. Zuri, Tanya's daughter." I stared at the screen, the letters swimming. What could she possibly want with me? We met in secret at a coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment. Zuri slid into the booth across from me, her hair braided neatly, her eyes darting as though someone might follow her. She was 19 now, caught between adolescence and adulthood, and she carried herself with the weight of someone who had overheard too much. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice hushed. "What's this about, Zuri?" She bit her lip. "It's about my mom and your account." My stomach tightened. "I didn't know at first," she continued, "but I heard her talking on the phone. She bragged that she found a way to make sure Jayden's future was secure. That's what she calls it. But then I saw receipts, your receipts, stuffed in her purse. She's been copying your handwriting, trying to make it look like you signed for the withdrawals." The world tilted around me. "You're sure?" Zuri nodded. I took a picture. She slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a blurry photo, a withdrawal slip. My name scrawled in imitation, the signature wrong but close enough that a banker in a hurry might not notice. I closed my eyes, swallowing the bile in my throat. "I'm sorry," Zuri whispered. "I know she's my mom, but it's wrong, and she talks about you like you're in the way. Like everything will be easier once Jayden's out from under you." Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw a girl, not just Tanya's daughter. I reached across the table, covering her trembling hand. "You did the right thing, Zuri, and I won't let her drag you into this, but I need you to be careful." She nodded, eyes shining. "I just thought you should know." That night I sat at the kitchen table again, the bills and the photographs spread out before me. The numbers no longer whispered, they screamed. Someone was stealing not just my money, but the story of my life. And if Tanya could forge my signature, what else might she forge? For the first time in a long while, I felt the walls of my small apartment shift, not with defeat, but with resolve. I had pulled a stranger back from the edge of death in a grocery store. Now I would have to pull myself, and my son, back from the edge of betrayal in my own bloodline. The bills had spoken, and I was ready to answer. The letter from the school arrived 2 days after my meeting with Zuri. It was folded neatly, almost politely, as if politeness could soften what it carried inside. "Dear Mrs. Carter," it began, "due to recent attentions surrounding your family, the scholarship committee has requested a special review of Jayden's eligibility. A meeting will be held Thursday at 6 p.m. in the auditorium. Your attendance is strongly encouraged." I read it twice, then 3 times. The words pressed on my chest like a weight. Jayden was sprawled on the couch, scribbling equations in the margins of his physics book. "What's that?" he asked without looking up. "Nothing you need to worry about right now." "Mom," he said, lifting his head, "don't do that. Don't keep it to yourself." I held out the letter. He read it, his lips tightening. "So they think I don't deserve it. They think," I corrected gently, "that we need to prove it." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I've worked my whole life for this. Every science fair, every exam, every late night, and now it's just a story to them." I sat beside him, laying a hand on his arm. "Then we'll show them it's more than a story." Thursday evening, I walked into the school auditorium with Jayden at my side. The room was filled with parents in neat rows, murmuring like bees. On stage, the scholarship committee sat behind a long table, papers spread before them. I felt eyes on me the moment we entered, eyes that said that's her, eyes that whispered the grocery store widow, eyes that judged my dress as too plain, my shoes as too worn. "Mrs. Carter," the chairwoman said into the microphone, "thank you for coming. We're here to discuss concerns raised by members of the parent community about fairness in the scholarship selection process." "Concerns?" I repeated, my voice carrying farther than I expected. "About my son." A man in the front row stood. I recognized him. His daughter had competed against Jayden in the regional science fair. "With all due respect, Mrs. Carter," he said, "your son is bright, no one denies that. But with all this publicity, one has to wonder, did the foundation choose him because of merit or because of optics?" The word cut like glass. Optics. As if my son's years of effort could be reduced to a reflection in someone else's camera. Another mother chimed in, her voice tinged with sweetness that barely hid the sting. "We're all proud of what Jayden has accomplished, but some of us have been fundraising for years, and suddenly there's all this attention. It doesn't seem fair." I felt Jayden stiffen beside me. I stood, smoothing my dress with deliberate calm. "My son has worked since he was old enough to hold a pencil," I said. "He's built machines from scraps, stayed up nights solving problems I can't even pronounce. His grades speak for themselves. His teachers will tell you about the hours he's put in, the extra projects, the leadership. He doesn't need a headline to prove his worth. He already has the work. There was a murmur, some heads nodding, others shaking. "Mrs. Carter," the chairwoman said, "we understand your passion, but emotions aside, we must ensure fairness." "Fairness?" I repeated. "Then look at the data. Look at the grades. Look at the projects. Look at the recommendation letters. My son is not a story. He is a scholar. And if you choose to reduce him to anything less, that's on you, not him." The room went still. For a moment I thought I'd gone too far. And then from the very back row I saw him, Evan Whittaker, sitting quietly, no entourage, no fanfare. Just a man in a gray suit, his storm-colored eyes fixed on me. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He nodded once, slow and deliberate, like a witness confirming the truth. The chairwoman shuffled her papers. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter. We will take your words into account." After the meeting, parents filed out in clusters, their whispers trailing like smoke. Some avoided my gaze, others offered tight smiles that felt more like apologies to themselves than to me. Jayden walked beside me, his shoulders squared. "You were incredible," he whispered. "I just told the truth. That's what made it incredible." As we reached the parking lot, I heard footsteps behind us. Evan caught up, his breath visible in the evening air. "You didn't need me," he said softly. "No," I admitted, "but it mattered that you were there." He smiled faintly. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't in hospitals or courtrooms. They are in rooms like that where people decide who deserves a chance. You won tonight, Monique, more than you know. He turned and walked toward his car, leaving me with the echo of his words. Back home, I checked the mailbox. Another envelope waited, this one unmarked, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with messy handwriting. "Stop making noise. You're not fit. Next time, you won't see it coming." I stared at the words until the ink blurred. Tanya's voice seemed to rise off the page, even if her name wasn't signed. I folded the paper slowly, laid it beside the bills still stacked on the table. They thought fear would silence me, but all it did was sharpen my resolve. Because the truth was clear now. The fight for Jayden's future was no longer just about scholarships or fairness. It was about survival, in a family, in a city, in a world that measured worth by the wrong scales. And I intended to win. The threat note lay on my kitchen table for 2 days before I told Jayden. I didn't want to worry him, but he saw the tightness in my jaw, the way I kept checking the locks at night. He asked once, "Mom, what's wrong?" And I shook my head, but he's my son, he knows me too well. By the 3rd day, I couldn't hold it in. I slid the paper across the table. His eyes narrowed as he read it. "This is Aunt Tanya," he said flatly. "I can't prove it. Not yet." His voice carried a new steel I hadn't heard before. "But we will." That evening, my phone buzzed with another message from Zuri. "Please, meet me again. I have something you need to hear." We met at the same coffee shop, back booth, shadows hiding us from the window. She looked more nervous this time, glancing over her shoulder before sliding her phone across the table. "I recorded something," she whispered. "You have to listen." I pressed play. The recording was grainy, voices muffled by clinking glasses, but I knew Tanya's sharp tone anywhere. "She'll crack under pressure," Tanya was saying. "Monique's too proud. If we push the right buttons, she'll fold. And once she does, the foundation will have no choice but to let us handle Jayden's scholarship money." Then another voice, deeper, smooth like polished wood. Colton Reeves. "You'll get what you want," he said, "but you have to keep the story alive. Donors love a struggling family. If she refuses to play along, we'll paint her as unstable, a burden, and then the board will cut her out completely." My stomach nodded. Tanya and Colton, together. The recording went on, Tanya laughing, Colton outlining how narratives could be shaped, how widows were always sympathetic characters until they weren't. He talked about controlling optics and leveraging community concerns. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Zuri's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to believe my mom would go this far, but she has, and she won't stop. I reached across the table, my hand covering hers. You were brave to bring this to me. She'll hate me for it, Zuri whispered. But I couldn't just stand by, not when Jayden deserves this chance. Not when you, her voice broke. You've always treated me kinder than she did. I swallowed hard. Then you're not standing by anymore. You're standing with me. Back home, I played the recording for Jayden. His fists clenched at the sound of his aunt's voice. She wants to control my life, he said. And that man, Colton, he's supposed to be protecting the foundation, not using it. I touched his arm. Now we have proof that this isn't just family drama, it's conspiracy. He looked at me, eyes blazing. So what do? I exhaled, slow and steady. We hold it, we protect it, and when the time is right, we use it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the city hum through the thin walls of our apartment. I thought of Tanya's smirk, Colton's polished smile, the way both of them saw me as a pawn in a story they could spin for their gain. But then I thought of Zuri, trembling as she handed me her phone, breaking the silence of a lifetime. I thought of Jayden, jaw tight, standing taller than I'd ever seen him. And for the first time since that night in the grocery store, I felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. Because if Tanya and Colton believed they had unlocked the path to destroying me, they had overlooked one thing. Zuri had unlocked the door back. The recording from Zuri burned a hole in my pocket for days. I played it again and again, Tanya's laughter twisting into my chest, Colton's smooth voice dripping with arrogance. Each time, the same rage rose up, but also the same question. What good is proof if no one hears it? By Thursday night, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't wait for courtrooms or committees to weigh my life on their slow scales. Tanya and Colton were already shaping the story in whispers. I needed to tell it in my own voice, unedited, unfiltered, so I opened my laptop. Jayden hovered in the doorway, concern etched across his face. "Mom, are you sure about this?" "No," I admitted, "but sometimes you do the right thing not because you're sure, but because you can't stay silent." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll be right here." At exactly 8:03 p.m., I clicked go live. The camera blinked on, and for a moment all I saw was myself, tired eyes, lines carved by years of work and grief, the navy blouse I'd ironed twice to hide its wear. For half a heartbeat, I thought of shutting it down. Who would listen? But then the first viewer joined, then 3, then 10. "Good evening," I said, my voice trembling until I steadied it. "My name is Monique Carter. Some of you may know me from the headlines, the nurse who saved a philanthropist in a grocery store. But tonight, I'm not here to talk about that. Tonight, I need to tell you the truth behind the story others are trying to write for me." I told them everything. About the overdraft notices, the forged withdrawals, Tanya's sudden interest in managing Jayden's future. I spoke of Colton's pressure at the foundation, his insistence that our lives become a fairy tale for donors. Then I played Zuri's recording. Tanya's voice filled the room, cruel and certain. She'll crack under pressure. The foundation will have no choice but to let us handle the money. Colton's reply followed, calm and sinister. "Donors love a struggling family. If she refuses to play along, we'll paint her as unstable." The chat window exploded. Comments poured in faster than I could read them. "This is elder abuse. Exploitation, plain and simple. Stay strong, Mrs. Carter." By the 20-minute mark, over 500 people were watching. By 40, nearly 2,000. Jayden sat beside me now, his hand resting on mine, grounding me. "I am not unstable," I said, looking straight into the camera. "I am a mother, a nurse, a widow, and I will not be silenced because my story doesn't fit the script they want. My son has earned his place with his own brilliance. I will not let anyone steal that from him or from me." At the 45th minute, my phone buzzed. A call was coming in, private number. I ignored it. The chat was demanding I continue. Then, another buzz. This time, a text: "Turn off the stream, now, or we'll make you regret it." I held the phone up for the camera to see. "This is what happens when you speak the truth," I said. "Threats, fear, but I've lived through worse and I'm not backing down." The comments surged, "Don't stop, we're with you, expose them." By the end of the hour, over 3,000 people had watched. I clicked end live with trembling hands, my heart pounding harder than it had the night I gave CPR in that grocery store. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Journalists, lawyers, strangers offering prayers. One message stood out, a short, direct email from Evan himself. "Monique, you were brave. Give me 24 hours. Trust me, EW." I stared at the words, my chest tight. For weeks, Tanya and Colton had been writing my life as though I were a character in their play. But last night, with nothing but a shaky laptop camera and my own voice, I had taken the pen back. And I wasn't about to let it go. By Friday morning, the live stream had spread farther than I imagined. Clips of my words were everywhere, on neighborhood Facebook groups, on Twitter threads, even stitched into TikToks where teenagers scrawled captions like "Protect Mrs. Carter at all costs." It should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt exposed, as though the walls of my small apartment had turned to glass. At 10 a.m., there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Lena stood there, crisp in her navy suit, but her eyes softer than usual. "Mr. Whitaker asked me to deliver this personally," she said, holding out a folder stamped with the foundation's crest. I took it with trembling hands. "What is it?" "A full independent audit," she replied. "Commissioned at his request, every financial movement inside the foundation for the last 2 years. He wants you to see it before anyone else." I sat at the kitchen table, the same table that had held bills, threats, and receipts, and began to read. The pages were precise, relentless. Numbers lined up like soldiers, each pointing toward the same conclusion: misuse of funds. Colton's signature appeared again and again, redirecting donor money, approving consulting fees to shell companies, inflating expenses. At the back was a summary in bold. "Total misappropriated funds, $3, $7 million, my breath caught. And then, tucked into the final pages, I saw it, my own name. A transfer request marked as approved assistance, Carter Family Housing Project. The signature was mine, only it wasn't. The forgery was almost perfect. Almost. Jayden leaned over my shoulder, reading with me, his jaw tightened. "So that's their plan, make it look like you already took money." "They wanted me discredited," I whispered. "Not just unstable, corrupt." By noon, Evan himself called. His voice was steady but urgent. "Monique, the audit is real. We've verified everything. Colton's been bleeding the foundation for months. He used your name because he thought no one would question a grieving widow. I won't let him bury you in this." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we take it public. Tonight." That evening, the foundation board convened an emergency meeting. It was held in a glass-walled conference room, cameras flashing outside as reporters pressed against the barriers. Somehow, I had been invited to sit inside, next to Evan, while Colton took the opposite seat. He looked different from the polished man I'd first met, sweat along his temples, jaw locked tight. Still, he tried to smile when the chairwoman asked for his statement. "These accusations are baseless," he said smoothly. "The so-called audit is incomplete, and this woman," his eyes flicked toward me, "is clearly unstable. She's using tragedy and sympathy to insert herself where she doesn't belong." The words landed like stones. For a heartbeat, I felt the old shame rise, the familiar script of being dismissed. But then Evan spoke. "We anticipated that response, which is why we hired 2 independent firms." He tapped the table, and Lena handed out folders to every board member. Separate audits, identical findings. Murmurs filled the room. Papers rustled like dry leaves. And Evan continued, his voice calm but cutting, "We have documentation of forged authorizations in Mrs. Carter's name. Our handwriting expert confirms they are fraudulent. Colton Reeves is solely responsible." All eyes turned to Colton. His mask cracked then, just for a moment. His mouth opened, then closed again like a fish gasping on dry land. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Reeves, until further notice, you are suspended from all duties. Security will escort you out." Gasps echoed. Cameras outside flashed wildly. As two guards stepped forward, Colton's eyes locked on mine. The smoothness was gone now, only bitterness remained. "You think you've won," he hissed. "But this isn't over. You don't know how many people benefit from keeping you small." I held his gaze, my voice low but steady. "I've been small all my life, not anymore." That night, news stations across Atlanta ran the story. Whitaker Foundation CFO suspended amid fraud scandal. Whistleblower widow speaks out. I watched the coverage with Jayden beside me, Zuri curled awkwardly on the other side of the couch. For once, my apartment didn't feel small. It felt like a fortress made of truth. But even as relief washed over me, I knew Tanya's shadow still lingered. Colton was out, but my sister-in-law would not go quietly. The storm had broken. The flood was still to come. The night Colton was escorted out of the foundation should have been a moment of peace. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe I could breathe without my chest tightening. Jayden laughed at a silly joke on the news. Zuri let her guard down enough to sip cocoa at my kitchen table. But peace in my family has always been like rain in August, short, fleeting, and never enough to quench the soil. By Saturday morning, the storm returned. It started with my phone buzzing relentlessly. Dozens of messages, then hundreds. Old friends, co-workers, church acquaintances, even neighbors I barely knew. Some were kind, "Stay strong, Monique," others were not. One message read, "Shame on you for dragging your family through the mud." Another saw Tanya's post, "Can't believe you do that to your own sister-in-law." My hands shook as I scrolled. Tanya's face appeared again and again, on Facebook Lives, in neighborhood groups, even on a flyer someone had taped to the laundromat wall. Her words were polished, rehearsed. "My poor brother's widow," she said in one video, feigning sorrow. "She's always struggled. We've tried to support her, but she refuses help. Now she's attacking family and accusing us of theft. It breaks my heart. I worry about her mental health. I only want what's best for Jayden." The comments beneath were a flood of sympathy. "You're such a good aunt. Prayers for Jayden. That boy deserves stability." I felt the air leave my lungs. By afternoon, Tanya's campaign had spread beyond Facebook. Local talk radio buzzed with callers debating the widow who bit the hand that fed her. A church sister called to say, "Maybe you should just let Tanya take over for a while. People are saying you're too stressed." Too stressed, not fit. The words circled me like vultures. Jayden stormed into the kitchen, waving his phone. "Mom, look at this. She's telling people you forged her signature, that you're the one who drained the accounts." I pressed my palms flat on the counter. Lies have long legs when people want to believe them. "But we have the recording," he shouted. "We have proof." "Proof doesn't matter if no one listens," I whispered. He went quiet, his shoulders slumping. Zuri looked between us, guilt flickering in her eyes. "She's dangerous when she feels cornered. I've seen it before. She'll keep twisting until people believe her. Then we'll untwist it," I said, though my voice trembled. That evening, I decided to face the fire head-on. The church held its Saturday potluck, and Tanya never missed a chance to parade her righteousness there. I hadn't wanted to go, but something in me knew hiding would only feed her story. When I walked into the fellowship hall with Jayden and Zuri beside me, conversations stilled. Plates of fried chicken and green beans paused halfway to mouths. All eyes turned to me, and then I heard her laugh. Tanya, standing near the dessert table, surrounded by a circle of women who hung on her every word. She spotted me and her smile widened. "Monique," she sang, loud enough for the room to hear, "we were just praying for you." My jaw tightened. Prayers are always welcome. Lies are not. A hush fell. Someone muttered, "Lord have mercy." Tanya clutched her chest theatrically. Lies, is that what you call concern? I've been telling everyone how worried I am about you, how erratic you've been since the accident at the store, how you're lashing out at family. I stepped closer, my voice steady though my knees shook. You forged my name, Tanya, you drained my account, and now you're draining the truth from this room. Gasps rippled. Tanya's eyes narrowed just for a second, then softened again into that false pity. You poor thing. Everyone hears the strain in your voice. It breaks my heart to see you unravel. For Jayden's sake, I hope you get the help you need. Jayden couldn't hold back. She's not unraveling. She's the only reason I've gotten this far. And you're the one hurting us, not helping. The room erupted in murmurs, sides forming in whispers. Some shook their heads at Tanya. Others avoided my eyes, unwilling to pick a side. Zuri stepped forward then, her voice trembling but clear. She's telling the truth. My mom's been lying. I've heard it. I've seen the papers. She's the one who forged the signatures. The hall fell silent. Tanya's face hardened, her mask slipping. Zuri, she hissed. How dare you? Zuri's chin lifted. How dare you ruin everything for your own daughter, too? Gasps again. The air was heavy, electric. I took a deep breath. You can smear my name all you want, Tanya, but you will not touch my son, and you will not silence me. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then Pastor Green, who had been silent until now, spoke. This house is for truth, not spectacle. If there are accusations, they belong in court, not in God's kitchen. The crowd dispersed uneasily. Tanya stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the linoleum. That night, back home, I sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light. Jayden leaned against my shoulder, Zuri at the table scribbling notes for a statement she wanted to give publicly. I opened my laptop, headlines flashing across the screen. Some praised me. Others tore me apart. My life was now a story being written by strangers, debated in comment sections, twisted by Tanya's venom. But in that small apartment, with my son on one side and my niece on the other, I felt a strange kind of calm. Let Tanya shout. Let her spread her poison. The truth had a way of outlasting noise, and I was learning how to speak louder than I ever had before. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish, of nerves and waiting. I had walked hospital halls for decades, but nothing in me was prepared for the sound of a gavel or the way whispers spread across the benches like fire. Jayden walked beside me, his hand clutching mine as though we were walking into a storm. Zuri followed close behind, a notebook pressed to her chest. Her chin was lifted, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. On the other side of the aisle, Tanya sat in a pressed suit, her lips pursed into something between a smirk and a prayer. Colton was beside her, his lawyers flipping through files as though money could still rewrite truth. The judge called us to order. The prosecution began with numbers. Pages of the audit, each transaction projected onto a screen. They traced the stolen funds like footprints across the snow, payments rerouted, checks forged, authorizations faked. Each one pointed back to Colton Reeves. Then came the recording. Tanya's voice filled the courtroom, sharp and smug. She'll crack under pressure. The foundation will have no choice but to let us handle Jayden's scholarship money. And then Colton's reply, if she refuses to play along, we'll paint her as unstable. The jury shifted uncomfortably. I watched their faces harden with each word. When it was my turn, I stood. My hands trembled, but my voice did not. I am not unstable, I said, meeting each juror's gaze. I am a mother who worked nights so her son could dream bigger than our apartment walls. I am a nurse who has held strangers' lives in her hands, and I am a widow who has been told too many times that she is not enough, but I will not let lies write my story. Silence followed, heavy and unbroken. Tanya was called next. She tried to smile, to sweeten her voice, but the recording was louder than her charm. You can't trust Zuri, she said, pointing at her daughter. She's just a child, she doesn't know what she heard. Zuri rose, tears brimming but steady. I know exactly what I heard, and I know what I saw. You forged her signature, Mom. You laughed about it. You said no one would believe her. But I believe her, and I won't be your shield anymore. The courtroom gasped. Tanya's mask cracked, the smirk faltered, and for the first time I saw the fear she tried so hard to hide. Colton's lawyers argued fiercely, spinning webs of doubt. But each strand broke under the weight of evidence. The audits, the recordings, the forged slips, even his own emails, subpoenaed and projected, where he referred to me as the perfect liability. When closing arguments ended, I held Jayden's hand so tight my knuckles whitened. We waited. Hours stretched like years, and then the jury filed back. On the charge of fraud, the foreman said, "We find the defendants guilty." My chest collapsed with relief. On the charge of forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud, he continued, "Guilty." Tanya gasped, clutching her pearls as though God himself had betrayed her. Colton sat stone-faced, the smooth mask gone, replaced by emptiness. The judge's gavel struck. Sentences were read: Colton to 12 years, Tanya to 8 with no chance of early release for the first 4. The sound of chains echoed as deputies led them away. Tanya glanced back once, her eyes burning with something between rage and regret, but I did not flinch. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Reporters shouted questions. I stood on the steps, Jayden on one side, Zuri on the other. My story was twisted by people who thought I was too small to fight back, I said. But today proves something simple: truth lasts longer than lies. The crowd erupted in applause. Somewhere in the back, I saw Evan watching quietly, his gray eyes steady. He raised a hand in silent salute, then slipped away into the throng, leaving me the space to own my moment. Weeks passed. Life slowed, not to quiet, but to steady. The foundation repaired my roof, not as charity, but as restitution for the harm Colton caused. Jayden received his scholarship formally, this time with no shadows cast across his name. Zuri moved in with us, her laughter awkward at first, then freer, like a bird learning flight. At night, I sat in the garden behind our new townhouse, smaller but ours, with a cup of tea in my hands. Jayden studied at the kitchen table. Zuri painted on the porch. And for the first time in years, I felt not just safe, but whole. I thought of my husband then, of the mornings when he poured coffee and kissed my cheek, of the promises we made to raise our son with love. I whispered into the night, I kept my word. To those who followed my journey, who listened when my voice shook, who stood with me when lies grew loud, I owe you thanks. You reminded me that even in a world that doubts widows, mothers, women who dare to stand tall, there is strength in speaking the truth out loud. I wish you health. I wish you families who love you without condition. And I wish you the courage to write your own story, even when others try to steal the pen. From my home to yours, thank you. Monique Carter.